her dad worked for Mayfield and he had a real good job and they had a real nice home. But that was just slim to none in Detroit City. There wasn't a whole lot of people in the heart of Detroit have a real nice home. You know what I mean? They had somewhere to live and they tried to do the best they could with what, little money they had. But I will say that Jackie's mom and dad, they had a nice home. And not only was it nice on the outside, it was real nice on the inside too. And I thought that was, pretty sharp. And my friend Nicky, that lived on Trumbull, and he lived in that house that was made like a castle next to the church. And who knows, he might still live there today, I don't know. I ain't been over there in a good while. But yeah, them were the two nicest places that I actually knew the people that lived there. And the rest of the people just had, regular houses, regular apartments, stuff like that. But a lot of people try to keep their house, looking good. Because I know when we was coming up, we always kept our house clean. And all of us kids as a group, we all had chores to do where everybody had to do it. And it just basically kept the house clean. Because for one thing, when you got to do the chores and you got to, make sure it's clean, you're not going to, be messing up too much because, you'll be the one cleaning it. So that's one good thing about, having to do chores as a kid. When you ain't gonna be quick to make a mess because or if you make a mess, you're gonna clean it up right away. So that makes a difference. But nowadays, a lot of people won't even have their kids clean anything. They rather clean it themselves or hire a maid service or something like that to clean their house. And then some people just like to, some people just don't, how they grew up and stuff like that. They just don't want their kids to, grow up like they grew up. They want to do something a little different, But as long as you're teaching your kids, responsibility and what's right and what's wrong and stuff like that, and to, respect their elders and stuff like that, you'll be all right, Because that was very important when we was coming up. You had to respect your elders and people in your neighborhood. If they was out and seen you doing something, they go to your parents' house and they'll let your parents know what you was doing. If you was doing, showing out or whatever, and they seen you doing it, they would go tell on you. So, and then, back then there was a lot of ass whoopings being given out back in the day. Which there ain't too much of that going on today, But some kids are, good and listen to their parents and all that, but some kids are just wilding and they just out of control, and but I believe that's just up to the parents. And if they just get so out of control that the parents can't handle them no more, or the grandparents can't handle them no more, they just gonna have to the authorities have to handle them after that, because if your parents can't handle you and your grandparents can't handle it, the only person left is the authorities. Right now, it ain't no joke. The president that we have now is he's cracking down on people being real violent, stuff like that, and, things like that. So all the youngsters need to pay attention to what's going on today, because it's not looking good. If you out there doing crazy stuff, you're gonna pay in a bad way. You know what I mean? So, and I'm sure y'all seen it. Those of you that's way out of hand and doing what y'all want to do and stuff like that. I'm sure y'all seen it on the news or heard somebody talk about it or something. So, the ones that's being way out there, out of control, they sending them off to a place where you ain't. From what it looks like on the news, they're sending them off to a place where that's your last stop, and there ain't gonna be no more coming home. You know what I mean? So the ones that's just way out there doing crazy stuff, y'all need to pay attention to what's going on, because that don't look like that's good for anybody, to be honest with you. So, and I guess it just depends on how far gone you are as far as how much trouble you're getting into, or what kind of crime you did or whatever. But they got a place for you, if that's what you choose to do. They got a place for you. And also, some of these cats are going to a place and they ain't coming back. So I hope that, any people listen to this channel, well, if you ain't heard about it, you need to check into it, because they ain't no need in just throwing your life away like that. You know what I mean? There's a lot of better things to do, positive stuff to do, and longevity is the best thing. You know what I mean? So if you're out there in some crazy situation, you need to find a way to get away from that, even if you have to leave and go somewhere else. You know what I mean? If it'll give you longevity in life and not have you locked up for the rest of your life or killed, it's better just to go ahead and get your shit together. But that being said, I'll just leave that right there. But I always hope that, the younger generation, makes good choices and stuff. And, everybody's going to get in a little something, because it's just a part of how you become grown. But, a little something and a lot of something is two different things. So if it's just regular stuff, you're just, learning and stuff like that, and you're just, you know, things like that, then that's one thing. But just being out there, off the chain, doing crazy things all the time, and maybe you ain't got caught yet, so you just keep on rolling like that. But that always comes to a stop and to a dead end, where to be like, a long time in jail, or possibly death. So whoever's listening to this, take my advice, roll straight, do positive things. And if you see somebody needs some help them out. You know what I mean? Because it could be the other way around. You might need some help one day and somebody can help you out. So, as long as you stay positive, good things are going to happen to you. And sometimes good things take a while to come. Sometimes they come fast, sometimes they come slow. Sometimes it just takes a while. But I'm telling you, if you do good things and stay positive, good things will happen to you. You know what I mean? So keep that in mind. And that's the best way to roll. And that's straight from Slick. Because I won't tell you, the wrong way to go. If I'm telling you a way, it's the right way to do it. It ain't no in between or nothing like that. It's the right way. Because I'm just this type of person where I'm not going to, I'm just not the one to blow smoke at nobody. You know what I mean? If I'm telling you something, that's what it is. You know what I mean? Because I just feel like, keeping it 100 is the best way to go, and sometimes keeping it 100 with somebody, people might not, agree with you or something like that. But, the old saying, like sometimes they say, well, the truth hurts sometimes, you know what I mean? Yeah, that's what it is. But I think everybody would want to be told the truth and keep it 100, and then you can rely on that individual. But somebody that's just blowing smoke all the time and trying to get you to do stuff that you normally wouldn't do, but you in a group or whatever and you just doing it anyways, stuff like that, you need to fall back from that. The best thing to do is be the leader, lead your own self. You know what your boundaries are, what you'll do, what you won't do, and don't be having somebody tell you what to do. Now I am telling you, to listen to my advice and stuff like that, but it's up to you to think, is dude real? Is he telling the truth? Or, should I listen to him or what? That's all up to you. But the thing is, I'm not going to tell you something that's wrong. I'm going to keep it 100 with you. And it is what it is, I just always feel like, staying true to the situation is the best thing. And don't get me wrong, I probably has said some stuff to certain individuals and stuff like that. It would be the truth, but they wouldn't, they would either shy away from it or, whatever the case may be. But, and that's where you get, that old saying, sometimes the truth hurts. But I just ain't gonna waste my breath on telling somebody something that it's not 100%, And I'm like this too. If you think I'm not 100%, ask me about it, and I'll tell you about it. You know what I mean? That's the way I am. I just like to keep it real. Because, you got a lot of people that just tell stories all the time. They're just made up stories. You know what I mean? And people like that, you can't you can't trust them to give you directions to the closest coffee shop. You know what I mean? So you don't want to roll with somebody like that. And then you got a lot of people that they tell stories because they can't tell the truth. You know what I mean? Because if they told the truth, they're liable to get in trouble for it. Yeah. So you got them kind of individuals too, But I always was like this as I was coming up. Is I wouldn't mind learning off somebody, like whether it be doing plumbing or painting or electric or whatever, working on cars, whatever it might be. I wouldn't mind learning, but I would watch people, and you would know if they know what they're doing or if they don't know what they're doing. You know what I mean? And that's what I did. I just over the years I had just watched certain people, and I would just I would know who to learn off of and who not to waste my time with. You know what I mean? Because you'll know right off top if they know what they're doing or if they don't know what they're doing. Just by being with them. So, and over the years, I've learned a lot of different trades. You know, I, I've learned plumbing, painting, press operating, welding. Working on cars, concrete work, framing houses. I've learned electrical work. You know, there's not too many things that I can't do, but there's certain things that I only do for myself. You know what I mean? And then there's certain things that I did over the years. But whatever I did, no matter what job it was, I've always did a good job. But there's places that I have worked in the past, and you do a good job, and you put a lot of work in and stuff like that. But then a lot of there's a lot of places that you work at that you don't get noticed, and I'm sure a lot of people's familiar with that. What you're working all the time, you come to work all the time, you're working, but you just really ain't getting noticed. But it ain't really you. What it is, it's the people you know that the company has put in charge. They put the wrong people in charge. So then at that point, they just start helping. They just start helping their friends and people they know, and it doesn't matter about the other people that's hard workers, been there every day, been there for a lot of years, whatever. That doesn't even take place. So that being said, it just depends on where you're working at, where you're going to get noticed for what you do, and stuff like that. But I'm sure that happens at every company around. You got some good workers, and then I worked at companies where I've seen good workers get terminated just so they can get them out the way and bring their friends in and hire their friends. Shit like that. So that as soon as I see that going on, I know that they got the wrong people. You know, picking the wrong people to make the calls and stuff like that. That ain't no way to be. You know what I mean? it ain't no problem if you get in a good position where you're able to hire somebody and fire people and stuff like that, it ain't no problem hiring your friends or some people you know that needs a job. But you cannot, people do this, but you shouldn't be able to terminate people and mess their livelihood up just because you want your friend to have their position that they put a lot of work into, a lot of years into, and it just ain't right. And I've seen that happen multiple times at different places. So that's crazy. But it's just part of life, I guess. That you have to learn as you go, and but when you're a good worker and you know your worth, and you see things like that going on, that ain't even the place you need to be anyways, because you're better than that. So if they want to continue with that chaos, the best thing for you to do is just move yourself out of that position and move on. Because people like that, they're going to fall later anyways. It's because they've done made a lot of bad choices, so they'll fall on their own, with no help from nobody. That's just the way. And it's basically what you call karma or whatever. It's just what goes around comes around. You know what I mean? And that'll happen. But yeah, I've done a lot of different things over the years, and I'm glad I've done a lot of different things over the years, because some people has done one or maybe two jobs in their whole life. You know what I mean? And there's nothing wrong with that neither. But what I'm saying is, I'm glad that I did the things I did, because I learned a lot of trades. And one thing I used to do in Detroit City is when I would want a job or a different job or whatever, I would just decide at my house what I wanted to do. Whether, if it was painting, plumbing, fence work, concrete work, whatever. Whatever I decided I wanted to do, here's what I used to do back in the days. I used to get the yellow pages. I would sit at the table and I would decide what I want to do before I even open the book up. I would decide what I wanted to do, and then I would look up that business. Whether it's a plumbing business, concrete business, fence business, whatever it was. And what I would do is I would just look up that business, and I would call. Sometimes I'd have to call 2 or 3 businesses, but every time that I did that, they would say they was hiring. And back in the days, that's when you used to go in and, fill out an application, stuff like that. But now you can do it online or whatever. But I'm just saying that was my recipe, to get a new job or to find a job. And then I had a few times I did go, but the yellow pages worked out for me, uh, you know, all the time. But there was a few times I went to a place. I went to one place that was like a day labor place. And what that was is they would sign you in, and then they would send you. I was actually working for a car plant, and what it is this huge warehouse that made like quarter panels, hoods, doors, stuff like that. And there's a place called Wagner's, and I believe it was on 14 Mile Road, and this is outside of Detroit. But worked there for a long time, and what it is that that service, you'd work your shift, and then you, like, say you work day shift, after you got off work, you could go over there and they would cut you a check for that day. And then if you work second shift, you would have to wait till the next day to get your money, you know. But if you worked third shift or first shift, you could get off work and go straight to the office. Then they had a liquor store right next to it, and the liquor store would cash your checks for you, you know. And I thought that was cool that they had a day labor place like that, because, you know, a lot of people, they're in such a hard predicament that, you know, if you got a job and they say, you got to wait 2 weeks to get a paycheck. And some jobs, they make you wait 3 weeks to get a paycheck if you're, you know, getting paid every 2 weeks. But if you're getting paid every week, that's the kind of stuff that's, you know, if for somebody that's having a hard time, the day labor thing was the ideal thing. And I feel like they should have this in every big city. In every state, in every big city is a day labor place. Because not everybody is equipped to, you know, get the job, make it 2 weeks, every day for 2 weeks before you got a paycheck. Or, like I said, if you got paid every 2 weeks and you had to wait 3 weeks, you know, that's next to impossible for a lot of people, you know. But if you, you know, a lot of people have support and they can get help, you know, to make it through the couple weeks or the 3 weeks or something. But some people ain't got that kind of help. So having a day labor place is the ideal thing for every state and every big city, you know. And, you know, not saying everybody will do the day labor thing, but most people will, you know. And, because it would just, you know, a lot of people that just wouldn't have the gas money to, you know, go and stuff like that. If you, all you would have to do is make it for one day and then you'd be good, you know. And so I thought that was pretty cool that they had that. And I believe that office was located on 12 Mile and DeQuinder, if I ain't mistaken. It's been a minute, but I think it's 12 Mile and DeQuinder. And but that was a pretty smooth deal right there for people, you know, because you could just get your paycheck, go right next door, cash it, and, you know, and do that. The way I did it is I just did that every day, and I would just hold most of all my money until Friday, and it was the same as getting a weekly check. You know what I mean? But at least you'd still have a little money to get you through, you know, for gas and stuff like that. I thought it was the ideal thing, really. I don't know what all y'all would think about it, but I'm sure y'all would think the same way I'm thinking. That's a good hookup, you know. But yeah, I worked there, and I was making hoods, and I made the SS Monte Carlo quarter panels when the SS Monte Carlo first came out. Uh, this it was something. It was interesting too. You know, sometimes them presses would take. It depends on what kind of part you was making. But sometimes them presses would take 4 people, 2 on one side, 2 on the other side. And then, you know, you see that. I don't know if y'all ever watched the 8 Mile movie, but the 8 Mile movie, it shows Marshall Mathers. M&M. It shows him working at a press company like that. It wasn't the one that I worked at, but he was at a place like that. And that's actually how you do it. You say up, down, up, down. And it was one person to say that, and that way everybody knows, because you can't really. The only way you can see the other two guys on the other side of the press is being down and look through there and maybe yell at them or whatever if you wanted to ask them something. But it was interesting to do that. I worked at a paint shop on rigs. And that was 10-mile rigs. It's called Paint Works. I worked there. And what we did there is paint army parts, stuff like that. So the only colors we was doing was, light green, dark green, or beige. And that was it. But we did a lot of army parts there. It was interesting. That paint shop there. They would get a lot of parts in. And they would ask, only a handful of people would want to do it because a lot of people didn't want to do it. But they'd ask you, do you want to take parts home with you and tape them up, mask them up, because there'd be certain parts that wouldn't get paint on. So you had to, put some masking tape and some brown paper, and stuff like that. And sometimes they'd give you some black paint. And it'd be like in a bottle with like a kind of looked like a fingernail polish brush. It'd be like that because some of the numbers on the part you'd have to paint it so it'd get black inside the numbers, and then you get a paint thinner on a rag and just wipe across it, and then you wipe it clean, but the black paint's still inside the numbers. And I did that a lot because I made as much money in one night, but I'd have to stay up all night doing it. I made as much money in one night as I did all week in my paycheck. That's how good it paid by taking them parts home. I used to load my trunk up, my back seat up, my passenger seat up, and then I would take all that home. And I lived on Homer by Woodmere Cemetery, and I had a house over there. Well, I had an upstairs, but it was kind of like the attic, but it had upstairs, and the whole house was just one big room upstairs. And I would take all the parts up there. I'd go get a friend of mine, James, and I'd ask him, do you want to come to help me? And he would be like, yeah. And I say, how much you want for helping me? And he really didn't care about the money. He was just wanting to come hang out and stuff like that. So he just said, throw me $20 or $40, whatever. And he said, well, I will help you for free, And I said, no, I ain't gonna let you help me for free because I'm getting paid for it. I want you to get paid too.